Hey, good morning, and welcome to our Q50 Community Church video for this Sunday. I hope this is an encouragement to you. We're living in strange times, a time that can stretch our patience, test our limits perhaps. But as John Piper talks about in his book, Future Grace, God's grace is grace for times of impatience. Well, I flipped that a little bit and took a more positive view in God's grace that gives us patience. So let's take a look at God's Word together and the story of Hannah, a woman who experienced both incredible tribulation and stress and an amazing demonstration of God's grace. We all love to see an underdog win. The book of 1 Samuel starts with such a story, the story of Hannah. This is a beautiful story, written with literary details and structure far too complicated to go into this morning. Let me tell you the story and highlight a few details. The story of Hannah has 4 parts. There is an introduction which defines the problem. Then come the details of Hannah's prayer. After that, she is pregnant. And finally, there is an expression of thanksgiving. Well, I wanted to use all T or P words, so we'll just pretend the P is silent. So here's a quick version of the story. Hannah is married to a guy named Elkanah. She is one of 2 wives. Interestingly, there's no comment about that made by the story maker, and I'm not sure why not. Perhaps it speaks to the pragmatic nature of Elkanah. Like Abraham, when he could not have children, he simply finds another wife, but at least he has the integrity to look after his first one. Who knows? Whatever, it's speculation. It's just interesting that this little detail goes unaddressed. Of his 2 wives, Hannah is the one Elkanah loves more. She is also the one who doesn't have a baby. The other one, Peninnah, seems to have had several children. The injustice is just beginning. Not only does Peninnah have several children, she seems to mock Hannah incessantly to the point of wounding Hannah deeply and intentionally. Apparently, this went on for years. Like most men, Elkanah's attempt to comfort his wife was poorly crafted. He said to her, "Don't worry about it. I love you more than her. Isn't that enough?" Obviously, it wasn't. Guys, don't say those kinds of things. We wouldn't even begin to explore what the household dynamics were like, so let your imagination fill in the details. I'm sure it wasn't pretty. Hannah sees only one course of action, to pray to God. The next time her family goes to temple to offer sacrifices, she accompanies them and goes directly into the temple to pray. Here's a fun fact. This is the only time in all the Old Testament that we are told a woman entered the temple to pray. I'm sure it happened at other times, but this was such a special event that the Holy Spirit guided the author of this story to record it for all posterity. Her prayer is so intense, so honest before God, that when the priest observes her, he wonders if she's drunk. You've probably heard the phrase, "dance like no one is watching." Well, here's Hannah, so lost in the agony of her soul that she is praying as if no one is watching. She makes a promise to God. If he will give her a baby, she will dedicate that child to serve God for his entire life. She leaves the temple and goes home, and after an unspecified amount of time finds herself pregnant. When her child, a son named Samuel, is about 3 years old, she returns to the temple and offers a supersized sacrifice to God in gratitude. She doesn't offer just a regular thank offering, but 3 times what Moses' law instructed them to give. And then she leaves her baby behind to serve in the temple. How heart-wrenching is that? The longest walk in my life happened in 2012 when we left Stacy in Canada and went back to Ecuador. We were staying at a hotel by the airport and she was going to live with her grandparents. We all went up to our floor in the hotel on the elevator, and then outside the elevator, hugged each other, cried, and said our goodbyes. We tried to make it quick to minimize the pain. Stacy got on the elevator and the doors closed. I was weeping as I walked the 100 feet down the hall to our room, desperately trying to control my emotions. The hall seemed a mile long. The 45 seconds lasted a year. I made it into the room and collapsed into broken-hearted sobs. But Stacy was 18. She was living with her grandparents. We could see her on Skype the next day. We would be back in a year. Yet my heart was crushed. I can't imagine Hannah. It's a powerful story. Let's look at some of the details. As compelling as the human actors are, especially Hannah, she is not the main hero of this story. The main characters are not human. The main character in this story is God himself. He is referred to 23 times in 28 lines of storytelling. And it isn't just a reference to God. He is identified as Yahweh, the name God gave to Moses when they met at the burning bush. It is the name of God's covenantal faithfulness. It is a reminder that the primary actor in this story is the loving Creator, and he is accomplishing something beautiful, even though the immediate circumstances, infertility, taunting, misunderstanding, all seem to say otherwise. The tension is heightened in verse 6. Her rival, however, would provoke her bitterly to irritate her, because the Lord had closed her womb. Unjust and unfair. What kind of God is this? Hannah cries out to God in the greatest of anguish and bitterness. She felt abandoned and forgotten by God. Her circumstances would certainly validate those feelings. They were honest and legitimate feelings. In her prayer, she begs for God to not forget her. It's a key idea in the Old Testament. Later, in expressing her thanksgiving, Hannah goes back to her prayer and gives thanks that God remembered her. There's some very significant theological truth happening here. One of the qualities that makes Yahweh, the God of the ancient Israelites, the God of all creation, the God that we worship today, one of the qualities that makes him unique is that he does not forget. He is never unaware. It is a major theme in the book of Genesis. God remembers Noah. God remembers Abraham. God remembers Sarah. God remembers Joseph. It's a way of expressing empathy using human terms so we can relate to the nature and character of God and the care he has for all of his creation. God is aware. God is engaged. But God works on a different agenda. From the beginning of the story, the tension builds. Year after year, they go to offer sacrifices. Year after year, Hannah does not have a baby. Year after year, Peninnah does. They lived in an age where having children was considered a blessing from God, and childlessness was evidence of God withholding his blessing, presumably because of sin. I'm sure the tongues wagged. I'm sure Peninnah was, well, I shouldn't say I'm sure. I wonder if Peninnah was the self-righteous type that offered all kinds of free advice. If you would just admit the sin, then God would give you a baby. Are you harboring some secret motive in your heart that only God knows about? Have you tried putting garlic under your pillow and all kinds of other advice? Utter nonsense. But we hear those kinds of messages from people today. The point of this story is not that the underdog wins, nor is it how to pray to influence God. This is a story about God himself and his engagement with those he loves. The story starts with extensive detail about Elkanah and his genealogy. Kind of boring for you and I, but this roots the story in time and space. It gives the details of offerings, of worship at the temple, of the name of the priest, and even to the point of mentioning the detail he's sitting on a chair. Why? Well, certainly it contributes to the literary and artistic value of the narrative, but also it demonstrates that God is aware of all the details of life. God works in human time and human space. Ours is not a God of mythological encounters, of weird and strange interactions. He is the God who created time and space and who has revealed himself in that time and space and who maintains his authority over time and space. He does so out of the character of his heart, love, and grace to care for all he has created, even though we may not respond well to him. I love this quote from Piper's book. Patience is a deepening, ripening, peaceful willingness to wait for God as in the unplanned place of obedience, and to walk with God at the unplanned pace of obedience, to wait in His place and to go at His pace. And the key is faith in future grace. What a great line. What a great description of what it is to be patient. It's not just putting up. It's not just enduring. It's not just pushing through. But in obedience, in trust, because of God's graciousness and faithfulness of His own character, to wait in the place where He puts us, and to move forward at the pace that He determines. Unplanned places and unplanned paces. A great description of walking with God, walking by faith, walking by His grace. Like Hannah, we all struggle. Like Hannah, we will need to unload our anger and angst at God. Like Hannah, we may suffer for many years with some of the burdens we carry. And unlike Hannah, we may not see the resolution of what we desire. The underdog doesn't always win, but God is always gracious. God is knowable, but not understandable. We must be convinced by faith that His love and grace are unendingly directed toward us. There are those underdogs who eventually won their battles, like Joseph, Moses, and Joshua. And then there are those who didn't, Habakkuk, Jeremiah, and James. But none of them were isolated from the grace of God. None of them were stranded, abandoned, or alone. Yes, all of them felt the angst of living by faith in a world that's dysfunctional because of sin, and all of them from time to time struggled with doubt and anxiety, but fortunately God's grace is not dependent on us pushing the right buttons, or being in the right place, or doing the right thing. Exactly for this reason, it is grace. Unmerited, undeserved favor of God who is working in time and space, in unplanned places, at unplanned paces, to accomplish His purposes in us and through us, for us and in spite of us. This is our God. Be patient. And when we feel like we are at the breaking point, hit the reset button by reminding ourselves together, and if necessary, if we're alone, that God is a God of faithfulness, of love, and of grace. And although our place and our pace may be unplanned from our perspective, God has known from the very beginning where we are, what we're doing, and what He is accomplishing. This is the life of Hannah. Not that she was able to move God's heart to give her what she wanted, but that she was able to recognize that God is a faithful God who responds to His people in grace at all times, in all places, because He is faithful. Well, thanks for taking the time to watch this. I hope you are encouraged. Send us an email if you have any questions or comments, or hit the like and subscribe buttons, and that way you'll be updated when future videos are posted. And look for our emails. Tomorrow I'll be sending out the Monday Morning Minute. You can sign up for that at our website, q50community.com. And if there's anything else we can do for you as a church, and as we go through this rather odd time as a community and as a society, be sure to fill out the contact information on our website and let us know so we can respond to you. Thanks. Have a great day. See you later.